A state built on ideas. The Soviet Union was unlike any state that came before it. It was not founded around a king, a dynasty, or even a single nation. It was founded around an idea. In 1922, the leaders of Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and Transcaucasia signed a treaty to form the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, also known as the Soviet Union. The USSR was born, with Moscow as its capital and Lenin at the helm. It promised equality, centralized economic planning, a world without class exploitation and collective prosperity. For much of the 20th century, it rivaled the United States in power, ideology, and global influence. At its peak, the Soviet Union governed nearly 300 million people across 11 time zones. Its armies defeated Nazi Germany. Its scientists sent the first human into space. Its influence shaped global politics for decades. And yet, in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed, suddenly, peacefully, and without invasion. To understand why, we must look beyond individual leaders and dramatic events. We must examine the structural pressures, institutional contradictions, and ideological fractures that shaped the Soviet system from the beginning. From Imperial Russia to revolution. Before it was Soviet, Russia was imperial. The Russian Empire was vast, multi-ethnic, and deeply unequal. Power rested with the Tsar and a small group of elites. Industrial workers and peasants had little political influence. Attempts at reform were limited and often reversed. By the early 20th century, pressure was mounting. Industrialization was uneven. Urban workers faced poor conditions. Peasants struggled under outdated land systems. Political participation remained restricted. World War I pushed the system to its breaking point. Military defeats, food shortages, and economic collapse undermined confidence in the monarchy. In 1917, mass unrest forced Tsar Nicholas II to abdicate. The February Revolution toppled the monarchy, leading to the establishment of a provisional government. But this was short-lived. In October, the Bolsheviks, a radical socialist group led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power, promising peace, land, and bread to the masses. The old state collapsed, but the new one was far from secure. Civil war and the birth of a new order. From 1917 to 1921, Russia descended into civil war. The Bolsheviks faced anti-communist forces, regional separatists, and foreign intervention. Victory required strict discipline and centralized authority. Economic control became military necessity. Industry was nationalized. Grain was requisitioned. Opposition was crushed. The early Soviet state learned to rule through emergency measures rather than consensus. When the war ended, the Bolsheviks had survived, but at great cost. In 1922, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, also known as the Soviet Union, was formally established, a federation of republics united under a single party and ideology. On paper, it was a voluntary union. In reality, authority flowed from the center. The system was already shaped by coercion, secrecy, and centralized decision-making. Those traits would define it for decades. Joseph Stalin and forced industrial transformation. After the death of Vladimir Lenin in 1924, leadership struggles reshaped the state. By the mid-1920s, Joseph Stalin emerged as the dominant figure. Stalin believed that the Soviet Union faced an existential threat. Survival, he argued, required rapid industrialization and absolute political control. The transformation that followed was unprecedented. Agriculture was forcibly collectivized. Private farms were replaced with state-controlled units. resistance was met with repression. Millions were displaced, imprisoned, or killed. Urban industry was reorganized under centralized plans. Production targets were set years in advance. Success was measured by quantities produced, not usefulness or efficiency. Fear became an organizing principle. Political purges eliminated perceived enemies. Labor camps expanded. Loyalty mattered more than competence. Information flow became distorted as officials feared reporting failure. Yet the results were tangible. By the late 1930s, the Soviet Union had become a major industrial power. Steel, coal, and heavy machinery production surged. The system proved extraordinarily effective at mobilization. But it achieved this by destroying feedback mechanisms, suppressing initiative, and embedding fear into governance. The state could command action, but not adapt easily. The making of a superpower. In 1941, the Soviet Union faced its greatest challenge. Nazi Germany launched a massive invasion, catching the Soviet state unprepared. Early losses were catastrophic. Entire armies were encircled. Recovery came through scale and sacrifice. Industry was relocated east. Society was militarized. The state mobilized every resource at its disposal. By 1945, the Soviet Union emerged victorious, at the cost of tens of millions of lives. The war transformed the USSR. It emerged devastated but powerful. Its armies occupied Eastern Europe. Its political system hardened further. Central control deepened. Most importantly, the Soviet Union now stood as one of two global superpowers. The Cold War had begun. The Cold War system and stability over change. For decades after the war, the Soviet Union stood as one half of a divided global order. Its influence extended through Eastern Europe and parts of Central Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Military parity with the United States constrained conflict, while ideology shaped global alliances. Domestically, the system emphasized stability. The planned economy provided employment and basic services. Education expanded. Poverty declined compared to the imperial era. But the Union struggled with efficiency. Innovation was slow. Incentives were weak. Information flowed upward poorly. Mistakes were concealed rather than corrected. After Stalin's death, limited reforms reduced terror but preserved central control. Under later leadership, particularly during the Brezhnev era, stability became the overriding priority. The system functioned, but it stagnated. By the 1970s, growth slowed. Technology lagged behind the West. Legitimacy relied increasingly on inertia rather than belief. The fractures widened quietly. Nationalities and the federal illusion. The Soviet Union presented itself as a federation of equal republics. In practice, it functioned as an empire. Dozens of ethnic groups were governed under centralized authority. National identities were discouraged, but never erased. For decades, internal borders mattered little because real power remained centered in Moscow. But the structure contained a contradiction. By formally organizing the state into national republics, the USSR preserved territorial frameworks that could later assert independence, once control weakened. During crisis, nationalism re-emerged with remarkable speed. What had been suppressed did not vanish. It waited. Mikhail Gorbachev and the limits of reform. In 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev became leader of the Soviet Union. He inherited a system under strain. Economic growth was failing. Technological gaps widened. Public trust eroded. The system could no longer reform quietly. Gorbachev attempted renewal through two policies. Perestroika sought to restructure the economy. Glasnost introduced openness in politics and society. The aim was reform, not collapse. But partial reform destabilized a rigid system. Economic controls loosened without market institutions replacing them. Political openness weakened party authority without establishing new legitimacy. Public debate surged. Historical crimes were exposed. National demands resurfaced. The system lost coherence faster than it could adapt. Collapse without conquest. By 1991, the Soviet Union was unraveling. Eastern Europe had already broken away. Central authority weakened. Republican governments asserted independence. In August, an attempted coup by hardliners failed, and with it, the authority of the Union collapsed. By December 26, 1991, Gorbachev officially recognized the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Boris Yeltsin, leader of the Russian SFSR, oversaw its reconstitution into the Russian Federation. The 14 other republics emerged as fully independent states. No invasion, no final battle, no dramatic overthrow. The state simply ceased to exist. 15 independent countries emerged from its collapse, carrying shared infrastructure, unresolved identities, and uneven futures. Conclusion. The fracture of an ideological empire. The Soviet Union lasted less than 70 years. It reshaped societies, powered industrial revolutions, and defined global politics for an epoch. Its collapse was not sudden, nor accidental. A system designed for mobilization struggled with adaptation. Central control delivered strength, but resisted correction. Reforms arrived late and destabilized more than they repaired. The Soviet Union did not fall because it lacked power. It fractured because its institutions could not reconcile ideology with reality. As we reflect on its legacy, we are reminded of the power of ideas, the complexity of social change, and the enduring impact of the past on our present and future. If you found this explanation useful, consider subscribing for more short and long-form explorations of history's turning points. If there are any future topics you would like us to cover, share your thoughts in the comments below.